All right. Welcome back into the Between the Hash Marks podcast on this post NFL wildcard weekend edition of the Between the Hash Marks podcast. I'm joined, as always, by my friend, my colleague, my mentor, the great Mike Tanier joins me after an insane week of football and an even more crazy first spin of the coaching carousel. Michael, how are you today?
I'm very busy. I've been very busy deleting all of my Sam Darnold is worth a $200 million contract articles that I was writing for my Substack.
I was scrubbing social media of all the they can't move on to JJ McCarthy tweets from earlier in the season and the same sort of thing. I would just like to, before we get into the housekeeping and the whole show, take accountability and retract everything that I've said about Sam Darnold being the franchise quarterback of the future for the Minnesota Vikings, because as we all saw on national TV on Monday night, he just ain't it.
It's amazing how, what has it been? 9 days, 10 days? The entire story flipped. And I think there's almost like the overcorrections are in two directions because, you were saying, a lot of people were saying, well, yeah, $200 million contract. Then you sell JJ McCarthy, trade him to the Jets for 5 first-round picks, and you rake. And now it's switched to what were we doing? What was that? And Darnold had a fine season.
Yes, but not a fine playoff debut. We'll get into all that and a whole lot more. As always, if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe on the Apple Podcast Store, Spotify, on my YouTube channel at Matt Lombardo 975, and leave us those 5-star reviews. They really do help boost the show, help grow the show, help people find us easier. We have a 5-star review to read at the end of the program. And of course, make sure that you subscribe to Between the Hash Marks on Substack, and more importantly, to the Too Deep Zone by Mike Tanier. It's mandatory reading. You'll be a smarter football fan every time you open it up.
Not more importantly, equally importantly, we're all doing this. We're all working hard for you. It helps make this show go. So check our stuff out. Consider a subscription if you have the inclination, time, and dough.
Absolutely. And Mike, let's just get right into this, because there was a moment in Monday night's game where I popped off the couch and I said, hey, I know what that means. It was when Sam Darnold threw his first interception and the ESPN cameras panned to Kevin O'Connell's face on the sideline. And it was as if in that very moment he had the realization, Sam Darnold just butted up against his ceiling. And this is now the glass ceiling that myself and the Vikings are not going to be able to get through with this quarterback.
It's like that old Simpsons gag. If you pause, you can see the exact moment his heart breaks.
Yes.
It's a little bit like that. And yeah, you said that. And boy, O'Connell after the game, I've never heard a coach just sort of like turning the page on the quarterback, like in that moment, so thoroughly. Like there was not a lot of diplomacy to it. It's like, yeah, Sam had to be better. Sam wasn't good enough. Sam is going to be working elsewhere next year. That's it. They were just really underlining it. Like, we are done with this. There was that, but there were so many sacks.
Yeah.
And really for the last couple of weeks, I think it was the story of Darnold coming back, holding the ball too long, getting into a weird place in the pocket, taking the sack. And it's like there had to be some place to go with that ball with all your receivers. And if there wasn't, you have to now be the veteran, not the young guy, and say, well, I'm throwing it away or I'm diving for it for 2 yards. And Darnold wasn't doing that when they needed him to.
That was one of those games where I wish it was on Amazon Prime, because the Prime Vision, where you're watching from the sky cam with the route trees drawn for you as the play is developing, it's a revelation in terms of watching football. But I almost wish that in real time I could have seen how many open receivers, how many times Jordan Addison had separation, or that Justin Jefferson broke open and Sam Darnold just didn't see them, because Darnold was seeing ghosts again on Monday night. The pressure was overwhelming from the Rams, but it seemed like he was feeling pressure even when it wasn't there. 245 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But the bigger concern for Minnesota moving forward, Mike, is that it wasn't just a 1-week mirage, because last week against Detroit, he just had 166 yards, and the pressure once again was overwhelming from Aaron Glenn, from the Lions defense. And I get the sense not only that the 20-minute cool-off period between the game ending and Kevin O'Connell's press conference wasn't nearly long enough for him to cool down, but I get the sense that Sam Darnold isn't just done in Minnesota. But I think he's going to, put up his arm and hail the next taxi back onto the veteran journeyman backup circuit rather than as a starting quarterback next year.
We'll have to see, because, again, we do have the body of work he did, right? I think a lot of times the cure for the pressure this year by the Vikings was to already have the lead and be up by 2 scores and being able to say, oh, 3rd and 15 draw play, whatever, we're not dealing with this. And they didn't have that in these games. But if you start counting quarterbacks, including the rookies, of which there are not very many the kids in the draft.
Yes.
Yeah, those guys, not the rookies. The rookies are good. Those guys, not a lot there, not a lot hanging around. If you've got one guy in free agency and it's Sam Darnold, and you start counting the teams that might have interest, I think he's going to get another contract. It's not going to be 250 million. It's not even going to be whatever the second tier is, that Baker Mayfield tier. But if you start making a list,
two situations, two
Yeah.
teams. The New Orleans Saints, because
Yeah.
I can't imagine them going back to the Derek Carr well at that amount of money. He seems destined to be a Saint. Or the Tennessee Titans, who don't necessarily seem to be high enough in the draft to get the guy in a very mediocre quarterback class. Those are the two situations. That's it. You can talk about the Giants, but I'm not bringing, and again, Joe Shane and Brian Dable have made worse decisions than this. I'm not bringing Sam Darnold back to that market. It's one thing to look at 14-2. It's one thing to look at the run-based play action offense that worked so well for the regular season for the Minnesota Vikings. I can't bring him back to New York. If they were the North Dakota Giants, maybe. They were the throw a Bismarck Giants, maybe. Not back to New York.
Carson Wentz is the quarterback for the North Dakota Giants, as we all know. What about the Raiders?
Raiders have the #1 pick. You got to go get the rookie.
Right? You get Cam Ward.
You got to get whoever. But there's one more that popped in my head.
Okay.
And I meant to say this in the list of 3. The Pittsburgh Steelers should kick the tires on Sam Darnold. Bring him into Arthur Smith's system. We've seen that Darnold is at his best off a play action pass. You have the running backs there. Maybe you bring Najee Harris back. Maybe you go and get Ashton Genty and you trade up in the draft to get him if you're bringing in Darnold on the relative cheap. But we saw Russell Wilson become latter-day Denver Broncos or worse, Russell Wilson on Saturday night. But from a schematic standpoint and from hey, we're just going to keep cycling through veteran quarterbacks on $12 million deals perspective, Steelers make some sense.
It does make sense. I could see it. And I'm also imagining, hey, Steelers, we solved the problem. A guy who lost in the first round of the playoffs. There's your solution. That is almost exactly like, the Falcons getting Kirk Cousins. Hey, we have a guy who kind of looks good statistically, but doesn't get the job done. That'll fix the Falcons. I'll throw one more at you, although that might qualify as your journeyman for hire thing. Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, and then you look at Anthony Richardson. He could play the Justin Fields role with Justin Fields as the starter in Pittsburgh.
Right, although I have a feeling Russell Wilson will go there to recreate all of that chaos. But there's options out there. I also, I thought what was going to happen is Darnold was going to get franchise tagged. So, we got a year, and if we switch to J.J. McCarthy on October 10th, we ate 1 year, and that's it, and he moves on. I don't see that now. If there's a contract put in front of him, it's going to be a low-ball offer, and the tone and rhetoric suggests there will not be a contract put in front of him. It's shocking.
For sure. And I guess that's where you start talking about the 14 regular season wins. The only 5 losses of the year come against the Detroit Lions, the Los Angeles Rams, and there was one more in there that they gave away.
There was a giveaway in there. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, but either way, 4 of the 5 come against the top team in the NFC and the team that you lost to in the playoffs, juxtaposing the regular season Sam Darnold against what we've seen in the 2 biggest games of the year. I think the fact that he lacks any sort of pedigree that makes you think that the 14-3 is sustainable. I think that the lack of that kind of pedigree makes the disaster of the last 2 weeks even more troubling for Sam Darnold and projecting him forward, because this looks like more like what he is rather than somebody who's capable of playing on the fringes of the MVP conversation for the majority of a regular season.
And that's true. It's that lack of pedigree, because it was by far not the worst playoff performance by a quarterback this weekend.
No, it was not. And, I had to laugh when I saw the breakdown come across and we were going to rank these. And my inclination was to put Sam Darnold at #1, and then I remembered that there was one way worse that happened earlier in the weekend.
You knew who was sending the email to you.
Yes, this was the Mike Tanier special. This segment was designed by and for Mike Tanier in every sense.
Yes, and it was rank. The segment is rank the losing wild card quarterbacks' performances, not their worth as humans, performances this weekend from best to worst. And I'll kick things off that the best performance by a losing quarterback this weekend was actually Bo Nix,
Yes.
the rookie, going out there and playing with a lot of dignity against impossible odds in Buffalo.
Yeah, and the way that they started that game, you have the clutch third down throw to move the sticks over the middle, followed by that gangbusters 47-yard touchdown to Troy Franklin, where you thought, they could make this a game. They could make this competitive. Look at Bo Nix. He looks competent. He looks like the moment isn't too big for him. And then Josh Allen just decided to play hero ball, and that was the end of that.
It was hero ball. It was hero ball in the trenches by the Bills, where they're just steamer rolling, controlling the clock. And then the Bills defense realized, I mean, it's Cortland Sutton and nothing else.
Right.
And even Sutton ain't Justin Jefferson. Like let's stop giving up fake punts, stop making little mistakes, penalties, and they ran there. So Nick's handled himself well. I'm going to go with the second best performance. I'm going to go with Baker Mayfield of the Buccaneers, who, except for that fumble, was playing really well, was playing really hard, getting the ball to Mike Evans, scrambling like a madman, and just had this terrible, terrible mistake that kind of cost them the game.
See, I read this as the guy who fell on his ass and came back down to earth. So I didn't even consider Bo Nix or Baker Mayfield on my list, but I think we're in agreement so far. Baker Mayfield, he played well enough to win the game, but the problem is you can't botch a handoff that deep in your own territory and hope to survive, even against Jaden fourth quarter Daniels, especially not against Jaden fourth quarter Daniels and a maniacal head coach who is just determined to live and die by the sword. And they live to play another day. I don't pin that loss on Baker Mayfield, but at the same time, it's a mistake that you can't afford to make.
Mistake you can't afford to make. Just some ragged plays. Not just that, but like the 3rd and 1 when they looked like they were going in to score, and the entire Commanders defensive line knew the snap count better than the Buccaneers did. A lot of things where the fit and finish was off at home for the Buccaneers. So we're going now to the ones that you were probably thinking of. I'm going with Russell Wilson next, who played poorly, but played like Russell Wilson has played in the last year or two. I think that he played. I think he had a better game than Sam Darnold had.
As in, he decided not to play until 10 minutes left in the third quarter. Like, is that where we're going with it? That's the bar now for Russell Wilson. Like, hey, we're going to let the first half just evaporate into the ether, and we're going to fall behind 20-0 or whatever the hell it was, and then we're going to show up and say, oh, you know what, he was okay.
Bar's pretty low. Bar's pretty low for the losing teams this weekend. And okay, do you think Darnold had a better game?
I would say that Jordan Love had a better game, even with the 3 interceptions, because they showed some moxie in the fourth quarter. I think that Matt LaFleur did him no favors by not putting him under center and exposing him to what the Eagles are doing from a pressure standpoint and a coverage standpoint. I don't think the Packers lost the game because of Jordan Love. I thought they lost the game because of poor coaching, poor play calling. They never quite married Josh Jacobs in that dominant running game to what they do best from an offensive standpoint. And I look at the Steelers, Mike, it's not just what Russell Wilson did on Saturday night or didn't do. They're in purgatory now. Well, I talked to an executive a couple of weeks ago who said, "Oh, you have to commit to Russell Wilson and keep building."
Oh God!
Not after that. Bring him back on a 1-year deal and keep building. You can't do it after that. I'd make the argument that Mike Tomlin should have played Justin Fields in the fourth quarter. That's what I saw out of Russell Wilson.
I would admit, if someone said to me, some executive said, "Well, look at the rookies. You're not getting one. They're bad. Look at all these other things. Give Justin Fields 2 years at $17 million, run like some crazy wildcat option-y thing, and try to build everything around him." I would say, yeah, I can actually see that. While that's really not optimal, that might be a course forward. Russell Wilson?
Yeah, there's no path. There's no path in Pittsburgh, and that's the purgatory they find themselves in.
You're finding yourself, you're going straight downwards with him at this point. And yeah, he played poorly. That whole team played poorly in that first half. They look like a team that realized that this was never going to happen for them. And Love, there were the 2 early interceptions. The third one was at the end. There were also some interceptable passes early on. And I look at how he performed in that game before his receivers got hurt, and it's hard to justify that as some kind of strong game on his part, or to blame everybody else along the way. He is tossing balls up for grabs. There was one before Bond intercepted it where Bond almost intercepted it. A couple of things like that. So I'm not this anti-Jordan Love person by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a weak effort that was exacerbated by the fact that all of his receivers were hurt by the fourth quarter and he didn't have a chance.
And then you lost a stalwart young center. He got hurt too late in the game. So it was just situationally, it just did not work for them. When you fumble the opening kickoff and you hand the Eagles the football inside the 20-yard line, that's tough to overcome. I mean,
Yes.
you need to rise to the moment, and I don't get the sense that Matt LaFleur rose to the moment in that game from a schematic or play calling standpoint either. So I go so far: Bo Nix, Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love, Russell Wilson. You're up.
Okay, so then we're going to Sam Darnold.
Yes.
Again, who was holding the ball too long. And the one thing about Darnold is his team should have been the favorite in this game. I mean, and we're not talking about, I don't want to get into anything about the neutral site or anything else like that. Darnold had the superior manpower out there on that field with his receiving core, with that defense, etc. And the fact that he's taking sacks, he is fumbling, he's throwing interceptions, the Vikings offense can't get under its own way. I think that was a worse playoff performance than Russell Wilson's, and I think it's on par with Love's.
Yeah, I think that it's very similar to what we saw out of Russell Wilson, except I look at Sam Darnold having a better supporting cast,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, how does that happen? How does that wind up happening when you have all of those weapons and you squander them and you're holding onto the ball forever? Wilson doesn't have that benefit. He has, I'm going to chuck it deep to George Pickens and hope he's down there to catch it somewhere. Mm-hmm. To me, that's no way to win. After deciding again not to show up at the stadium for the first half of the game, they couldn't sustain any drives. They couldn't get anything going. Darnold at least should have had the benefit of Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson. They never even tried to get the running game going with Aaron Jones to take any sort of pressure off of Sam Darnold because they couldn't, because they fell behind so early. But before I give my reasoning for the worst quarterback in the world, on the planet, on Wild Card Weekend, I'm going to hand it to you and let you give the honors, because I know that you've had this holstered for months and months, if not years and years.
Justin Herbert is a very good quarterback. Justin Herbert does a lot of things well. He has outstanding traits. He makes some outstanding throws. There has been, for at least 3 years, a dedicated effort by a group of influencers who may have a little too much faith in their own judgment or their own power to claim that Justin Herbert is a great quarterback, is a objectively great quarterback, belongs in some conversation where we would put Joe Burrow or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, even if we're putting Patrick Mahomes on this other pedestal, even where we might put Matthew Stafford at this point in his career. Justin Herbert demonstrated inarguably that that's not the guy he is yet, and I will give him the gift of yet. But I found it fascinating. First of all, I personally thought the Chargers were going to be able to win this game. I thought Herbert was.
I spent 2,500 words talking about how the Chargering era had ended and that the Chargers were now a playoff machine around Justin Herbert. So I'm right there in that boat with you. I thought that they would be able to turn the page, that they would be able to take care of business in Houston.
And it was fascinating to go on social media on Saturday night, again, as somebody who's been the skeptic, who's been the voice in the wilderness for years, and see all the most dedicated supporters of Herbert's unquestioned magnificence getting pot shots thrown at them by the peanut galleries of social media and saying things like, well, you just don't understand. It was this, it was that. No, he had a bad game. He had a very bad game, and he tends to have weaker games. He tends to be very sack prone. He will make mistakes, et cetera, in these clutch situations. This is common. That is part of who he is. He's not usually a 4-interception guy, but this is part of who he is. And it was interesting to see how defensive people were getting in support of Justin Herbert, who, again, I would love to have him on about 22 different teams, 23 different teams. He's not that guy. And in order to be that guy, you got to do the stuff.
Right. And in one moment, the fourth and forever throw to Lad McConkey, I
Mhm.
made the mistake of putting out a post on Threads that's why you can't throw in the towel on Justin Herbert, because of moments like that. It's
Yeah.
in there. There are there's the ability to make those throws that not many quarterbacks can make in that spot against that defense in that game situation. I made the mistake of saying that. And it's funny that you bring up the vapid analysis of these influencers and overzealous
Mhm.
armchair evaluators, because
Mhm.
I get then off of that post somehow
Okay.
lumped into that category of people who are trying to shoehorn Justin Herbert into this top five quarterback conversation in the league, which
Mhm.
he's clearly not. I'm not sure that he's ever been. I'm not sure I've ever made that case. I can make a compelling case that he's a top 10 quarterback in the league. I don't know that there are 11 other quarterbacks in the NFL that I would want leading my franchise other than Justin Herbert, especially with the garbage receiving core that everybody not named Lad McConkey that they've built around him for the better part of the last 3 years. But I've never made the case that he's a top five quarterback, right?
No.
But that's now, if you talk about football and you praise one moment in a playoff game, that's who you now become because of what's been foisted on Justin Herbert by these draft nicks, by these people who watch, Chargers games in the regular season, and they see him
the
put forth these great second halves and they anoint him. And
the
we all have
Tuesday
to suffer.
the Tuesday morning NFL club. I mean, you and I are talking on a Tuesday, early, late morning. But like the ones who think the game is being played at stop motion and rewind and pause quietly at your desk on Tuesday afternoon and forget that no, it's being played on the field on Sunday and that the results actually do matter. It's not like taking the each play apart with Zapruder footage type thing and talking about all the things he did right with his pinky and the rotation on the ball and crap like that. And that's what we're up against. That and also just the cheerleader types who are kind of shoveling on with that. I mean, throwing in the towel on Herbert is absurd. Like that's nothing anyone would even suggest. They do need to build around him, but that's the thing. This has always been the case. Okay. And
He's the anti-Darnold, because where Darnold does not have the pedigree as a number three overall pick
Mhm.
and the body of work in the regular season that makes you think that you can elevate in the postseason. Herbert has consistently put them in a position in one of the more daunting divisions in football where you're butting up against the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes every year, put
Mhm.
them in the position to be in the postseason.
Right.
0-2, not great. But
Right.
again, you come back to the supporting cast, build around him, continue to commit to running the ball with Jim Harbaugh's philosophy, go get some pieces on defense, and you see what happens. But I don't think that anybody is reasonably talking about him as this top five quarterback in the league.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't checked the YouTube feed. We've got some people who are going to swear by this and jump up and down and say, well, trade hit places with Joe Burrow and see what happens or whatever. And okay, and I'll just say this. I'll put it on the record out there in the world. So next year, the Chargers get T. Higgins and they draft G&T from Boise State at running back, and they get out there and they reach the AFC Championship game or whatever, and Herbert has a couple of big wins and everything, and like I'll be cheering alongside them along that, and there'll be people like I told you so, I was right all along. If you've been riding on this, Herbert is a top five, top three, elite, whatever term you want to use, quarterback for 1, 2, 3 years, 4 years, you have been losing people money. You have
Right.
losing
Right.
people money in wagers and in fantasy because you're been telling them over and over again that this guy is doing something that he wasn't doing, wasn't really ready to do, wasn't capable of doing. So you can go out there and wait 2025, 2026, 2027, have your victory lap. I'll be reevaluating Herbert based on the supporting cast and what he does. And I'll be trying not, and you and I both will be trying not to mislead people into thinking that this is something that it's not.
Yeah, I can't get over the 40 passer rating. I just can't. And then you,
Yeah.
you can't you can't show up into a playoff game and post a 40 passer rating. Am I bitter that I spoke to people around the league about why this round of the playoffs might be different for them? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but you can't come out and have that kind of effort. The Texans are beatable. And CJ
Right.
Stroud, for as great as he is, and as dynamic as Nico Collins is, and as dominant on the ground as Joe Mixon is, and as swarming as that pass rush is, that's a winnable football game if Justin Herbert is the quarterback that these people seem to think that he is, regardless that it's Quentin Johnston and Gus Edwards as your running back.
Yeah, and here's the thing, and Jalen Hurts didn't have a great playoff game or whatever. Packers cough up the ball very early in the game. Jalen Hurts delivers a touchdown pass to that mystery person. I don't know that this weirdo 89.
Jahan Dotson decided to show up. Yes.
Woo! Anyway, and so you get that. The Texans spotted turnovers to the Chargers. They result in field goals. It's 6-0 for eternity in that game.
Yeah.
You're being given opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. You're not even like Russell Wilson, like, dude, it's 21-0 already. I mean, I know I played badly, but like it's 6-0. You've got the lead when you're not playing well. Where's the on switch that says I am the guy who can carry the team? It turns out CJ Stroud was the one who had it, even though has one receiver and guys blitzing up the middle on him constantly. He had the on switch. Herbert didn't.
Correct. And the other team out of Los Angeles, the Rams, who were forced to play on Monday night under unimaginable circumstances. You know, you see the photos from their practice last week. There's something like 2 miles away from one of the wildfires that's burning. Their facility is like 2 miles away from there. So the air quality can't be great. They fly the entire families. The Bidwell family, you know, generously sends out the Arizona Cardinals jets, puts them up at the facility, the families, the dogs, the cats, they come out and they boat race Darnold and the Vikings out of the building. And it wasn't just humiliating Sam Darnold. It was an offensive clinic by Matthew Stafford and Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua that dominated them in all phases. And in addition to what they did on the field, I just commend Sean McVay and that entire organization for rising to the occasion with the backdrop of, I don't know if my house is going to be there when I get back on the plane.
Right. And some of that's unimaginable. And like, I don't like even speculating about that. Cause like, what did you do? Or what did you say? It's professionalism on a lot of individuals. It's tempering their emotions and things like that. On the field, I looked at that game as a defensive game, but you're right. McVay schemes things up so well. And like, he has like the anti-blitz system now down to a science where like Puka's going to be there. We're going to have like a constricted formation with like 2 tight ends and 2 wide receivers. We're all in like this. So if we need an extra blocker, we can get it. If we need a hot read, we can just quick it into the flats and things like that. And he had all the answers there. I don't know if, and we're here in Philly, I don't know if like the Rams are that big a threat to the Eagles right now. I don't want to be super recency biased. Well, they won last night, therefore, you know, they're unstoppable. And also they're a good team, but Eagles handled this game pretty well about 2 months ago.
Yeah, there's 2 things in play here. One, it's the fact that they had 9 sacks and 12 quarterback hits on Sam Darnold. That kind of defense, that's going to travel anywhere. And I think that Les Snead, the general manager in that front office, deserve a ton of credit for building a defense that's primarily homegrown and primarily mid to late round picks that are just punching above their weight.
Yes. And you got Verse as a high round pick, Fisk's a high round pick. I think Kobe,
it's like a 3rd or a 4th round pick.
Yeah, defensive line Kobe's a 4th round pick, and cornerback Kobe was the kid from South Carolina State, albeit the one that like Deion Sanders was like, I couldn't get him into my program, and like everybody had their eyes on him, and he's coming around. So
friend of the pod, Quentin Lake, having a stellar second half and a really nice game the other night. So you have that element at play. But Mike, I look at, we talked about this on the podcast last week. I thought the Packers had the defense and the pieces, and if Jordan Love was playoff Jordan Love, I like the Packers a little bit in that game. I don't, again, crazier things can happen. I just don't see the Rams flying from Arizona back to Los Angeles, dealing with everything, coming into Philadelphia against a team that, I wrote it in the column on Monday. If that Eagles defense shows up for the next 3 weeks, they're partying with the Lombardi at Cafe Du Monde over beignets and coffee and charcuterie in New Orleans on Monday morning after the Super Bowl. That defense was lights out. They confused, they stymied, they forced turnovers against Jordan Love, all of those things. But I just don't know how, if you're the Rams, you can ratchet up that emotional level a second time. Why fly back to LA? Why not stay in Arizona for the week? Why not fly to East Rutherford and practice at the Giants facility? Get out of there. Get a normal prep week. I don't mean to be insensitive about what's going on with the fires, but if you can keep the families together, keep the people they care about most together, get to a safe place for everybody, it just seems like you're up against way, way too many obstacles to come in and play a team like the Eagles that are going to want to right the ship offensively. For as dominant as that defense was, they survived that game against the Packers. They didn't win it, in my opinion.
and the only reason the Eagles defense didn't stand out more is because the way the Texans defense looked. And
Right.
blessed are those who don't have to make the decisions that the Rams have to make in terms of
Yeah.
where you don't know what, like, what the wives are thinking, or like, well, maybe our house is okay and school's open and we're getting a kid back. So there's all these other things that are out there. Um, I don't have the numbers in front of me. Matthew Stafford's not a very good cold weather quarterback.
No, and I have a piece coming out tomorrow morning. The one key matchup that will define each
Yes.
divisional playoff game, which I'm excited to put out there. But for Eagles Rams, I think this game really comes down, not to boil it down to two simple terms here. I think it comes down to Saquon Barkley for either team, because you think back to the regular season matchup, career high 255 yards, two touchdowns of 60 plus yards.
Hmm.
But this is a different Rams defense that they're going to play, because dating all the way back to week 7, which includes the Saquon outburst, the Rams are fifth best in terms of allowing explosive runs of 10 yards or more. So they've tightened up that running defense significantly. If you can withstand that performance and still be fifth best in the league, not giving up big runs, if Barkley runs wild, the Eagles are going to win the game. But if they bottle him up, and it's a quiet game, and all of a sudden you're forcing Jalen Hurts to make plays against that secondary we touched on, to A.J. Brown, to Devontae Smith. You force Jalen Hurts to beat them, it could delve into a rock fight a little bit.
It definitely could. One thing, when I watch the Rams defense, they want to get upfield so fast.
Yeah.
And so the trick is delays, draws. The Eagles have a lot of sort of like outside runs to Barkley that are meant to punish the defensive lineman, come upfield too fast, and the ball's already around them. Eagles are going to be running a lot of stuff like that to try and counter what the Rams do. And I think the Eagles, they need a little more Jalen Hurts, need a little more Dallas Goedert, which we saw a little of, and that sort of perked them up a little bit when he was catching a few shorter passes. And if the Eagles are able to do that, I think they're fine. I think they're
Right,
fine.
and the Eagles now 10-0 this season in games where Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown are both on the field together. So you have that trend going for you. You look at Devontae Smith.
Club.
So where was Devontae Smith?
Devontae Smith had a couple of catches. It was AJ was reading the book on the sidelines.
Yeah, true.
It was a weird, tricky, like the Packers defense was blitzing, and Hurts was kind of doing his thing where checkdowns are illegal to him. Like the middle of the field is lava. He was doing that whole thing. And eventually he started finding Devontae and he started finding Goddard a little bit. And I don't know what's going on. I heard some rumors with him and AJ and what that's all about. And I don't want to think too hard about it. But it can't be like that.
No,
Because again, it cannot be the Saquon show exclusively, because everyone's gunning for that at this point.
for sure. And I think for the Rams, it's going to come down to not only stifling Saquon, which we talked about, but can they get Puka Nacua going? Because the one thing that the Packers weren't able to do, I know Christian Watson had the torn ACL the prior week. I know that Romeo Doubs went down with the concussion in the third quarter. Jaden Reed got banged up. So you're kind of playing that game with one hand tied behind your back. But Puka Nacua, he's the game breaker, and he's the guy that can take a 5-yard out route 47 yards and take it to the house. So if they get him going and they strike early, and then you can blitz Jalen Hurts, to me, that's the formula. You have to get up on the Eagles early, take Saquon out of the game a little bit. That starts and ends for the Rams with involving Puka.
Yeah. I think the Eagles match up well against Puka for two reasons. One is I think all the corners can kind of handle him. No one handles Puka, but he's a bigger receiver, not a quicker receiver. He's somebody Slay might have solutions for, Quinion might have solutions for. Eagles are a pretty good screen game. There's a lot of getting the ball out quickly into the flats to Puka. That's where you got Bond in pursuit. Dean's hurt, but you got other guys, Blankenship's good in pursuit, etc. That can turn some of those Puka 12-yard screens into 3 or 4-yard screens and force the Rams to do something else.
For sure. And the marquee game that I think everybody has circled going into the weekend, Ravens Bills. And you said, just say anything other than I can't wait to see it. And that was the first instinct when I was getting out of the car from dropping my daughter off, looking at the outline. Can't wait to see it. But what I can't wait to see is, can Lamar Jackson do it again? Because can he silence the detractors once and for all? And beating Josh Allen on his turf in this situation, if he can replicate the performance he had on Saturday night, and Derrick Henry deserves all the flowers and all the praise in the world. I think Derrick Henry unlocks a lot of what they do best. And I think that Lamar is benefiting from that just as Henry is benefiting from Lamar, really symbiotically there. But there was a play in that game in the first half where they're down near the goal line and Lamar Jackson is under pressure in the pocket. And this is the beauty of that prime vision where you can see the play develop as it's happening. And he's drifting 10 yards back in the pocket, simultaneously manipulating the defense as he's stepping up. And he hits a wide open Justice Hill for a 5-yard touchdown. It was a holy crap jump off the couch moment for me. If he can do that again and do it consistently in the playoffs, maybe we stop talking about Lamar Jackson coming up small in the postseason.
I would love to stop talking about Lamar Jackson coming up small in the postseason. We just talked about 6 quarterbacks coming up small and talking about legacies. And I think that can be uncharitable at times. But then you have somebody who has won a bunch of playoff games, has led a bunch of playoff victories, who is always dealing with the moving goalposts. Yeah, but you didn't do this. Yeah, but you didn't do that. So I like those goalposts to stop moving. You mentioned the Justice Hill touchdown. It was the play or two before that where Jackson completes a pass over the middle, gets everybody lined up, and spikes the ball, where you realize you're talking about I hate to say this because Jackson gets othered in all these different ways, fully functional veteran quarterback doing the fully functional veteran quarterback things, not some scrambling, side story or whatever. Gets them lined up, gets the spike down, gets the play in, then makes this play the Justice Hill. That's the kind of Lamar performance. I'm not rooting against Josh Allen, mind you, but as I said on another podcast, when the Bills lose, it's always a Bills thing in the playoffs. But when the Ravens lose, it's always a Lamar Jackson thing. There's implicit bias at work. I don't think that I have to be shy about saying that. And I would like that to come to an end. I got one other thing. Derrick Henry has 918 postseason rushing yards as of now, after running for whatever he did last week. Derrick Henry is 9th on the all-time postseason rushing list. If he gets 82 yards, he will be one of 7 guys to have 1,000 career postseason rushing yards. You want to hear a list of postseason legends?
Hit me.
Emmitt Smith is the leader. Franco Harris, Thurman Thomas, Tony Dorsett, Marcus Allen, a real postseason wonder. Terrell Davis, a real postseason wonder. And Henry will have passed John Riggins, for older guys, the ultimate postseason wonder who went out there and Hulk smashed his way to Super Bowls.
Fit him for the gold jacket now. And he was probably going to get in the Hall of Fame anyway. But you look at what he's done this season and project out the next couple of years in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson in that scheme that emphasizes the run game as heavily as Baltimore does. Put him in the Hall of Fame, give him the gold jacket. It's set in stone. And I wrote about it back in March. I don't think that there was a better marriage in free agency than taking Derrick Henry's running style and dropping it into a backfield next to Lamar Jackson. And you talk about all the fully functional things, which has become an evolution for Lamar. I thought we saw a lot of that last year. I thought that last season during the regular season, he was no longer the Michael Vick experience or the Randall Cunningham run out there and make 4 magnificent scrambles and we're going to win the game. He started to use his legs to draw the defense in the pass rush to set up these electrifying downfield accurate throws for big plays. You're seeing more of that now. And we talk about what Russell Wilson had or didn't have for the Steelers. We talk about CJ Stroud not having Stephon Diggs, not having Tank Dell. They didn't have Zay Flowers. They didn't have their field stretcher in that game, and Lamar still had that kind of performance. So I'm with you. If I never hear again that Lamar Jackson comes up small in the postseason, or that he can't throw in the playoffs, or that he's a freakish athlete who happens to play quarterback, if I never hear it again until the day I die, it'll be too soon.
Yeah, guess what? We work on the internet, so we'll never stop hearing it. But you're right. I'm with you 100% otherwise.
And we look at this, you want to tie a bow on the postseason talk before you have one more fun topic to get into.
Okay.
Who's the upset this weekend? Because I can make a compelling case that all 4 home teams take care of business in advance. Who's the best chance of an upset?
Every year this time, I do the same thing you're doing. It's like go Chalkzilla. It's chalk time.
Yeah.
And we love this weekend, but it's it's usually, and if you bet all chalk, it usually winds up being 4-0 and 3-1. So you're probably going to win if you line your bets up right. The closest one I have is the goofiest one. I could see the Commanders against the Lions.
Yes. Thank you. Thank
Right.
you. Because Dan Quinn is Dan Campbell light. They've taken everything that the Lions do best, imported it to Washington, got some good players, got a gangbusters future current star in Jaden Daniels, who might already be a top 6 quarterback in this league against a team that started 412 different players on defense this year.
Right. And it's one of these things where it turns into the shootout. And now you got Jared Goff playing a shootout instead of just handing off in the fourth quarter, which I think they're more comfortable with. You have the 420 different defensive players for the Lions, and they have like the bottom half of that 420 in this game for most of the evening. The over unders up at 55.5. And so I'm not saying it's going to be an upset, but if you had to say pick one of the four and like put together a parlay or something like that around it, I would probably take the Commanders on the logic that if the game gets weird in the fourth quarter, they're very good at weird fourth quarter stuff. So is Dan Campbell, but Campbell could get mad at any time and be like, 4th and 23, we're going for it. Screw it, we're going to jam it down their throats and trip over his own best instincts, which I don't think the Commanders are as likely to do.
Right. And I just look at what they've developed into on offense. They've become really balanced, whether it's Austin Eckler, both as a runner and a pass catcher. Zach Ertz has become a bigger piece of that puzzle in the passing game, which is exactly what you need with a young quarterback like Jaden Daniels. And Terry McLaurin might be the most criminally underrated receiver in football. And De'Ami Brown was on a field that had Mike Evans and Terry McLaurin and De'Ami Brown. Brown tied McLaurin for the team lead in receiving yards, caught all 5 targets on Sunday night. And I argue he was more effective than Mike Evans was in that game, even though Evans had bigger plays and more yards. There's just a lot of balance to what Washington's doing. I'm all in on Jaden Daniels. I think that we're going to be talking about him in that pantheon for years to come. I love Detroit. I think the culture is the envy of professional sports, what they've built there. I think that the offense, when they can dictate to you, we saw them just stomp out the Vikings with the running game late. They do a lot of great things. I'm kind of with you that the Commanders could sneak up on somebody, as I've been saying since August.
Right. You have been on top of on this train for a long time here, but again, like I'd be more comfortable. Like, I'll tease it to plus 12.5 or something like that. I'm not loving it. And just to be clear, we don't consider Ravens Bills. That's not an upset. No, that's
a coin flip.
That's a coin flip.
That's one of those.
Oh, and it went
over that way somewhere.
The cat is trying to eat it now. Okay.
So we talked about the playoffs. We talked about all these great games, all these, teams that are vying for the Lombardi. What the hell is going on in Dallas? What is happening?
Did you see what I did on Blue Sky yesterday?
You got yourself into all kinds of trouble.
Oh my God.
I saw the engagement and I'm like, if I hadn't already lost any hope in humanity and America's future, it was the responses to that post where you said sources, Jerry Jones requests permission to interview Mike Vrabel.
Yeah.
And the responses were people, I'm surprised I didn't see Pro Football Talk aggregated or one of these various aggregation houses that I now work for send it to me. People were all in thinking that it was real.
Folks, I don't know what to say. I know it's a lot of new followers probably on Blue Sky, but that's also, is this your first time on the internet? Sometimes it's satire. I thought I'd grooved that one in perfectly. Like the Vrabel press conference that just happened. My feed was full of Vrabel Patriots news. So I thought everyone was going to get it. And like 1 or 2 people falling for it is one thing, but yeah, yes. I had to block people. People were coming after me.
People thought you were a bot or something. And I'm getting a phone call just now from Fort Worth. Whether Jerry Jones is listening through the Zoom or whatnot, who knows who this is in Fort Worth, Texas. But either way, there are so many things wrong with this situation in Dallas. Not firing Mike McCarthy on Black Monday, whether he forgot to or not, which is a legitimate possibility. Maybe they just forgot to let him know that we're not going to renegotiate the contract. But in the meantime, I don't think Mike McCarthy is all that deserving of a head coaching job anywhere after lying to the world about his analytics think tank in his basement the year before he got hired by the Cowboys, and then lying that he watched all the games to prepare for the season. 2 strikes, you're out in my book when it comes to Mike McCarthy. But when you're Jerry Jones and you forgot to or didn't yet fire Mike McCarthy, and you declined the Bears' request to interview him because he's still under contract, and then you fire him, what is going on?
Right. You wait a full week so you can't get the bye week.
Right.
Interview. Right. You can't interview Aaron Glenn.
Talk to Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn or any of these guys.
Right. You can't make those interviews, and like nothing. The only news coming out is, first of all, and I'm guessing it comes from Coach Prime's camp. Coach Prime wants us all to know that the Cowboys want Coach Prime, which they might. I don't know. Who knows?
Crazier things have happened, Mike.
And now Zimmer says he's contemplating retirement, the defensive coordinator. Well, of course he is. First of all, he spent a lot too much time chirping this year anyway about what's wrong with the world and society and everything else like that. I don't know if anybody's excited about Zimmer at this point, but like, yeah, your staff is going to wander away, and you're already behind the coaching cycle in terms of interviews, and the only smoke signals coming out is that you want Coach Prime. This is not a good way to run an organization. And the only reason why it doesn't come up, because the Jets are worse.
Right. And the second most predictable hire other than Deion Sanders, Coach Prime, is Kellen Moore, which would be the funniest thing ever, that you let Kellen Moore walk because you don't think that the offense functions at a high enough level for Dak Prescott. And you watch what he did in Philadelphia with Saquon Barkley, and you decide, ooh, I like that. I can win with that. And then you bring Kellen Moore into the fold as the head coach and the next one. But it's like watching the Giants. It's like watching a franchise that doesn't have a plan start throwing darts at the wall, seeing where they land, and figuring out what they're going to do from there.
You know, it's funny. I'm doing mailbag, and a Bears fan asked, what do you think this crazy process the Bears have, where they have the owner and the CEO and the GM, and they have like a director of finance, and they have a consultant in the room with the coaching staff, and they're bringing the guys in first class. And what do you think of that? And it's like, compared to the Jets, compared to the Cowboys, compared to the Patriots, was like, get me Vrabel. We know him. Bring him back. Let's hire him as soon as possible. Compared to those things, yeah, put 10 execs in the boardroom and have a normal interview. You're doing great, Bears. That's brilliant. So it's everything is relative in the NFL, but like,
compared to the last time when they made Matt Eberflus fly coach into Chicago, I think that they're doing okay this time.
That's the whole thing. They're flying first class now. They're flying guys first class. And I'm starting to think, well, wait, do you fly from Detroit to Chicago? Is that something you fly? Isn't that normally? I guess you do. Like, I would rather, even if I'm like the VIP, like send me a deluxe Uber.
Yeah.
From Detroit to Chicago if I'm Johnson or Glenn, because it's like, let me ride in style rather than like going through customs and stuff like that.
Right. Well, send a private jet.
Send the private jet.
Send the private jet.
Yeah, but isn't again?
How expensive can that be?
I don't know. Maybe you don't know. It's one of those things like flying from Philly to Pittsburgh, where the plane goes up and the plane
go up and then you get down after like 15 minutes.
But then you're also like,
they don't even serve the biscotti on the Delta flights from Philly to Pittsburgh.
But then you're so far out of Pittsburgh, where the airport is, that you're driving anyway. And it's like, maybe I should have driven, but then when you drive, it's like, I'm trapped in the mountains and this is hell. So maybe that's what it's like going from Detroit to Chicago. I don't think so. I think it's flat. I'm way off topic here. What were we talking about? Jerry Jones. Okay.
Jerry Jones. This is going to be really fascinating because it doesn't seem like there's much of a plan, but we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, it doesn't bode well. I also, you saw who Florio's, what name Pro Football Talk put out there
for the Cowboys?
Jason Witten. Based on his what is he? I thought he was still on the Raiders roster. Honestly,
he's a tough guy, but beloved in the owner's suite, maybe.
Right, a great director of sales and promotions. Like, that'd be a great job for someone like Jason Witten. Pay him a lot of money, have him be a face man. That's great. Maybe he's a tight ends coach. I don't know. But that was, take that with a grain of salt. That's a Pro Football Talk thing. That might have been a favor,
One thing not to take with a grain of salt is the 5-star reviews that are rolling in for the podcast. We have another one this week, Mike.
Oh my God, great.
This one comes in from Dr. Possum. 5 stars. The rapport between Mike and Matt is fantastic. They both bring different opinions. Those opinions interact real well because they're great hosts. Make sure you listen to this podcast. So thank you, Dr. Possum.
Does Dr. Possum work on possums, or when you go in to see him, is he just lying there like?
Well, maybe he's an actual possum with a PhD, like an overachieving possum, an overachieving marsupial.
We found a way to cut medical costs in America. One more way. Your HMO only provides you with medical care from possums.
From possums,
From
yes.
possums, from actual possums. No gophers, no raccoons. They might be too clever. They have bandit hats. They might try to steal something. Only possums.
We might not be far away from that being our reality in this country, the way we're heading. But anyway, Mike, what do we have coming up on the Two Deep Zone? I hear some pretty exciting things are happening in the Two Deep Zone.
A couple of really exciting things happening. Well, mailbag is happening, and that is exciting. I'm doing a lot of things there, but I don't remember because there's like 20 different topics I'm doing at once. We have a Hall of Fame article coming soon. I'm going to tease it every week. It's going to come closer to the Super Bowl, and it's called Eli Manning and the Hall of Chaos.
I can't wait for this.
Yes, and it's
great headline, by the way.
Thank you very much. It's based on conversations with actual selectors, off the record, anonymous. They give their thoughts. I run them through a blender, spit them out for you. That's going to be a lot of fun. And we're going to be doing some on-site reporting sometime in the next few weeks from a couple of locations.
Awesome. Can't wait for that. I'm hoping to beg, borrow, and steal my way to Mobile for the Senior Bowl. Updates on that coming soon. Before we do get out of here, though, just a heartfelt thanks to all of the subscribers. Welcome to new subscribers, because last week I ran a promotion on the site, 10% discount to any new paid subscribers, and earmarked 50% of all those proceeds to California wildfire relief. I would have loved to just cut a check, just not in a position to do that right now. So I was kind of racking my brain. How can I help? And we wound up donating $300 to Direct Relief, which sends money to first responders, medicine to people who are displaced, N95 masks to deal with the air quality and all those things. So thank you to everybody who signed up.
Yeah, thank you to everybody. Great idea, Matt. Glad you did that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And this week, some fun stuff. We'll have the keys to every divisional playoff game coming on Wednesday. The mailbag on Friday, where people ask their questions, and I'll go to the league sources and get their thoughts. Dueling mailbags coming up, it sounds like.
Yes, dueling mailbags, but yours, of course, has the league sources, and mine has a lot of sort of dirty jokes. So
Great value in both, and there is value in nearly spitting up your coffee while reading the Two Deep Zone, as I have been known to do. How many times have I texted you, hey, great line in the column? It's like clockwork on a Monday, right?
I appreciate it every time. Thank you so much. I do appreciate that. And folks, if you are a reader, subscriber to me or Matt, when you send those notes along on a thread, on a Blue Sky, on a tweet, whatever, in a Discord, it keeps us going.
It does. It's great motivation.
Yes.
Mike, this was a lot of fun. Enjoy the games this weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody.